Hello everyone, and welcome to the round table. Unlock your creative genius and get paid for it. It is wonderful you made the decision to be here today and join us in this life-giving conversation. My name is Rosine Kushnik, and I'm delighted to be the host of this series of round table discussions. I have made it my business to support artists to live their full potential. And before we get started, if by any chance you can't listen through the entire conversation, but would love to do so, the video will be available for another 24 hours after its original posting time. And you are most welcome to download the conversation by clicking on the upgrade package. Today, I would like to say a warm welcome to Kenny Warner. Kenny Warner is the artistic director of the Performance Wellness Institute at Berklee School of Music. He is the author of Effortless Mastery, Liberating the Master Musician Within. He is a 2010 winner of the Guggenheim Fellowship Award in Composition. He is a Grammy-nominated pianist and composer, and he tours all over the world and has composed for orchestras worldwide. Welcome, Kenny, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
I'm very grateful that you can be part of this video series and share with us your great wisdom and experience as it pertains to all artists. And with that, I would like to hand it over to you. I know you have your whole book is all about unlocking the creative genius, and I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about how you do that and how you support artists.
Well, the way artists unlock their own self is a couple of things that go into it. First of all, they have to be willing to commit to their art. In other words, whether they are writers of words or writers of music, or if they paint or if they draw, they have to be willing to commit to that without judging what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Because if you're judging from the outset of what you're doing, you can barely write a word, scarcely do one painting stroke, and every note that comes out in such an inhibited way. So the first thing is kind of an ancient spiritual tradition of detachment, being able to commit the act and not judge it as it's coming out. Mm. So a couple of ways of doing that, or a couple of facets in that, is one, not also valuing oneself by how good their art seems to be. Mm. See, good, bad are real inhibitors in this case. It is a good practice. And one of the things I do when I work with musicians, I don't work with other artists, but is practice letting go of their most precious attachment, the need to sound good. Mm-hmm. So
now, how do you do that?
Well, you literally practice it. You put your hands on the instrument and you begin to move on the instrument. And as soon as you care, you drop your hands. Oh. So it's literally like a reprogramming. Because no matter how much everyone agrees that art should be made from an uninhibited place, no matter how much one agrees that we shouldn't judge ourselves by the art, or that, you know, we want to open up and become a channel for the art to flow through us, or whatever the creative output is. It could be technology. It could be in any area. Although everybody agrees that, they may have an old pattern of really trying to control what they're creating because they think that what they're creating says something about their value as human beings.
And well, so you literally, how does that work? So let's say there's a painter with a paintbrush and they're painting away, and then it is the exercise that they are asked to notice when they start to wonder about their work?
Yes, it is an exercise in awareness. Mm-hmm. So in the case of a painter would move their hand, move the brush around the paper, and you almost pretend the hand doesn't belong to you. Because in a sense, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. If you want this, the name of my book is Effortless Mastery, Liberating the Master Musician Within. Now, that second part of the title is sort of a hint to the process. Of course, we all have different ideas of who the master is in our lives, whether it's God or even an atheist may believe that there is a power that is greater than themselves. And most artists will agree that their most inspired time was when they felt like something or someone took over and created for them. So, but people seem to think that that will happen just by itself, like a bird will arrive and then it'll fly away when it wants to, and we can't control it. The notion of effortless mastery is the notion that it can be practiced. So the way a painter would practice, they would move their hand and they would allow the hand, pretend that the hand belonged to somebody else, that the hand had a mind of its own, or that God was moving the hand, or that Rembrandt was moving the hand. That, whatever their belief system is, they can access that and allow that force to move the hand. As soon as they go, oh no, that color's not good, or that's too free, or that's too this, they would drop the paintbrush or the pencil. So this is not, and it's important to say, when you're practicing this, you're not practicing the art. You're practicing this state of mind.
Yeah.
So,
and what do you recommend a painter or a musician or whoever, what do they do once they drop the hand? How do you encourage them to go back?
Well, see, another chapter of my book is what's called the space. So it's necessary to mention the space at this moment. The space is a place beyond or above or below the conscious mind. And the reason I say that is because we don't know where it is. But for example, some people think of that space in religious terms. Some people think of that space in spiritual terms, which is not necessarily the same thing. Some people think of that space in psychological terms. That space could be anything from the Holy Trinity to a runner's high. Mm-hmm. But what we all understand is that it's a space somehow beyond the mind or the conscious mind. The conscious mind is thinking, strategizing, trying to survive, thinking how it has to survive, and all of a sudden it lets go, and we're in this wider space. Almost everyone has experienced that, whether it's a new love affair, or a sexual experience, or a runner's high, or a peak experience in their particular faith, or just psychologically. We know that there's a space beyond the conscious mind. They call the superconscious mind or the subconscious mind. These spaces are somehow a wider perspective. So the reason I say above, below, or behind is because I always imagine it as above the conscious mind. Meaning, if I was sitting at the bottom of the ocean and everything was still and quiet and colorful and clean and very still, if I looked up to the surface and I saw driftwood and beer cans and underwear, something that people tossed off a boat, we'll say, right? That would be the conscious mind. I see the thoughts, but they're up there and I'm down here in a safe and still space.
Mm.
This is what however anyone gets there, and there are many, many modes to get there.
Yeah.
New Age books and holistic practices and spiritual paths and everything. But I just call it the space. It's a non-denominational thing. This space is what you have to learn to come from. So, for example, meditation is a classic way that people learn to get away from their conscious mind, and they fall into a space. And from that space, everything gets simpler, everything gets quieter, everything gets really positive, because the mind is not injecting doubt, which is one of its favorite things to do.
Right.
So, however they get into that space, once in there, and there is, like in my book, there's a CD, and those are meditations that I spoke over music, with the idea of getting you into a space. But the thing that's new about the idea is that once you reach that space, then you pick up the brush. You touch the paint. You put it on the canvas. Now, if you lose that space, you put the brush down and you go back into the space. And only then do you pick it up again. Because you're not practicing art. You're practicing moving from that space.
I love it.
It's a liberated place to be. But it also offers the chance for a power of another level to take over. And many great artists will say, as soldiers would in war, there was a moment something took over and it just did it for me, and I did things I was never capable of before. We almost all have that experience, but we almost all don't know how to choose to have that experience.
Yeah, and what I love about what you're saying is that a lot of us hold on to this myth of the great artist that is just born that way, and it just happens for them. And if it doesn't happen for me, then it means, I'm probably not meant to be an artist, or I'm never gonna amount to anything, or whatever the stories may be. But what I really like about what you're saying is that there's a very, almost like a systematic way to train yourself as a whole being, not just your mind, but your body as well, to notice when your hand is moving without the commentary of your mind, and when does the mind kick in, and then stopping it. So I think that is a very empowering exercise to literally, well, you just said you can choose it. It becomes a matter of choice.
Staying in it. See, that's the thing. It's not exactly that you can choose it, not unless you train yourself, because we all have patterns, and this is not new information. We may behave contrary to the way we have already decided we don't want to behave.
Right.
This is already the principle of addiction and being in places you shouldn't be and doing things you shouldn't be doing. He said, I swore I'd never do that again. Why am I doing this? That's because the mind forms patterns, and those patterns become the path of least resistance. In order to form new patterns, the good news is it is possible through repetition of the new pattern. But it doesn't become a choice for quite a while until that pattern is a little more entrenched and is close to being as accessible as the old pattern. Because we find that a new pattern takes a lot of conscious effort to keep repeating. An old pattern asserts itself by itself.
Right.
So the good news is you can carve out a new pattern. The bad news is that it takes a lot of work to do it.
And in your experience,
that's the trick. So what you're practicing here is allowing the hand to move without. There was a few things in what you said before, like what we think, oh, we won't amount to anything. Well, that's the driftwood and the beer cans floating on the top. You have to learn to be in that space where you see those thoughts, but you don't react to those thoughts. So that's the first thing before you even pick up the paintbrush. And if you begin to have moments in that space, then the thing that's new about what I'm saying, or hasn't been said as much, is that then you pick up that object that is your test, the thing that you do judge yourself by, the paintbrush, the musical instrument, the pen. How does an author do this? An author would just start writing words. And as soon as they care what those words say, they put the pen down.
Yeah.
This is
And
a way to learn to become a channel.
and you were saying earlier that we always like to link what we do back to our own value, or we understand it to be a reflection of our own value. Can you say more about that?
Yes, because this is sort of a spiritual question. You know, who are we? And I don't know that it's an American thing, but it's certainly a modern society thing that people define themselves by what they do. So people that earn a lot of money might feel in some ways more secure than people that don't earn much money. People that have jobs at the top of the corporate structure might feel more powerful as people than the people that work below them. But this has caused a lot of unhappiness and even depression in society because we are something deeper than this. And I think if you look at the last 30, even 40 years, you see a mass wave of people trying things, striving to learn who they are without their career, without their possessions, without their, because it's fashionable to say, I'm a musician, nothing else matters. But in fact, that's not the deepest place to come from. I am. You can fill in the blank. I am is one of the most earliest, oldest declarations one can make about their being. I am. And I play music. So the less of a sense that a person has of their own self-worth, the more they seek it in how everybody likes what they do, for example, the further away they are from their true identity. And finding a true identity is something that our video here and the other people you talk, it'll be a infinitesimal fraction of the amount of things out there that are a help to people for finding their true identity. Once we understand that that is actually the beginning of how one brings their art into a place of true identity rather than the more shallow, value, judging themselves type of thing, then you have a whole world of avenues open as to how one goes deeper into their true identity, just as human beings.
And I take it that the 2 points you have shared so far, they really like practicing to not identify one's own value or basing one's own value based on how our music or paintings look. That also influences the ability to just stay in that space.
Yes, that's part of the practice. You come at it from a couple of different sides. Whenever the only way to train the mind is sort of the way you would train a dog. For example, I had a dog that when you open the door, he used to go crashing into the screen door. And he just wouldn't wait for you to open the screen door. So a couple of times, I didn't open the door, and he went crashing into the door. He looked at me. I said, go back there and sit down. So he sat down again. I started to open the door. He started to move. I closed the door again. And I did this several times until when I opened the door, he didn't rush towards the door. He waited until I told him he could go. That's what I meant to say. So in the mind, the same thing. You start to think, you put the instrument down. You go back to the space. You're in the space, you pick it up, and you move from the space. As soon as you lose the space, the other thing, some thought has creeped into your head that's very much like the thoughts you expressed. And you keep doing that until you can stay in the space for longer and longer periods. And so this is all pre-creativity, except you may find that the thing you do in that space is the creativity. That actually is the art.
Right.
And it is the true self.
Right.
But there's no room for judgment while you're, you can even judge yourself after you're done. But you have to be careful. As long as you don't judge it while you're doing it. See, because there's a place here for practice and improvement and becoming a virtuoso at whatever you do. The place is in looking what you did from that spirit, and you say, yes, I bless that because it just came through me. I didn't judge it. Now, I wish that when I was in that space, I could be more precise. And then this gives us the reason to practice technique. You practice technique so that whatever it is, whether it's words, poetry, art, anything, you practice the technique of it, and that's the part of the brain that does that. It's kind of vaguely left brain, right brain. With your left brain, you practice the technique. Then you go into the right brain, which is to just harmonize yourself with anything that comes out. And you start noticing that even from that very free space, you're starting to become precise because of the support of what you've been practicing. The disciplines of what you've been practicing are beginning to show up when you're just letting go. But they're coming in completely organically. You're not trying to do anything. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yeah. This is the most important thing, because people will practice when you're painting or writing and you're judging it. That's practice. In real time, there's no time to do that. All you can do is accept. So, for example, as you're writing or as you're painting, you're in the space of, that's the most beautiful color I've ever seen. That's the most beautiful words I've ever seen. That's the most beautiful music I've ever heard. You're in that blessed space. Then, when you go into the other side, you go, okay, now I see. I don't have the skill to do this from that space. But you wouldn't want to crush the creative spirit just to force the skill. What you'd want to do with the other part of your brain is practice the skill to a level where it asserts itself without you even trying. Now, when those two things come together, that's effortless mastery. I'm painting precisely, the shading, everything, but all I'm doing is moving my hand. That can be practiced. Everybody won't necessarily get there, but everybody will get closer to the joy of creating if they learn to allow the creativity to come through them. And in order to do that, they must certainly suspend judgment. More than that, they should even presume beauty.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I liked what you wrote in your book about, you were writing specifically about music, how you invite musicians to relate to every sound they make as beautiful.
Right. This is necessary for that programming. It's not like a philosophy like, oh, everything is equally beautiful, which I do believe. But this is not about the philosophy. This is about programming. If you believe that every sound you make is the most beautiful sound you've ever heard, there'll be an intoxication in the exchange between the hand and the instrument, or between the hand and the brush and the canvas. It actually becomes intoxicating. But
Tell me more about that.
Well, if you inject what you would call reality, well, no, it's not skilled, or I'll never amount to anything, which is not reality. It's just negative ego. But if you inject that, you ruin this beautiful flow. It's a program. Right before I make this, as I make the sound, I go, bing, that is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. Now, that's different than going, bing, that's the most beautiful sound. If you wait, you're going to turn around the first two words. I wrote that in the book too. If you go immediately, that is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. But if you wait, you'll go, is that the most beautiful sound I ever heard? You cannot wait. So you write, word, 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 word. That is the most beautiful phrase I've ever seen. And you're learning to brainwash yourself to love what it is that comes out of you. We're already brainwashed to judge what comes out.
Right.
Why would we object to deprogramming that? And there's nothing wrong with washing your brain.
Yeah.
You want to wash it with
keep it clean.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with being programmed. You want to be programmed to succeed.
Yeah.
And success here is loving what you're doing.
Yeah.
Try to figure out all the way down the line what's going to happen. Is anybody going to like this? Is anybody going to buy it? You can't commit the first brushstroke.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience working with students? Of how long does it take students who have no reference point for what you were just sharing with us? Let's say they have no meditation practice, they haven't done anything similar to this. How long does it take them to get a little bit more space into their work, into their creative work?
Actually, it can happen instantly. There is a simple way to meditate, and I'm not an expert in meditation. I am not a meditation teacher, and I have an overactive mind that makes it very hard for me to meditate. So I want to make that clear. I made that clear in the book. And it should be inspiring for people to know that you don't have to you don't have to be a yogi to know some simple truths. You can be like a guy from Long Island and know some simple truths, you know. But the simplest way to just get that experience, I'll be in a class and I'll say, everybody close their eyes. And I'll say, you're breathing, right? Just notice that you're breathing. And the funny thing is you can either notice that you're breathing or you can think, but you can't do both at the same time. If you start thinking thoughts, even like, wow, this is a great space, you're not noticing your breathing anymore. And of course, the mind has a million ways to trick you into thinking again. But every time you think, you go, oh, okay, I'm thinking again. Just gently bring your mind back to your breathing. It works for anybody. There's nobody who, as soon as they start noticing their breathing, which they're doing anyway, would not immediately get just a tad calmer than they were when they were thinking. Now, as soon as they do, I say, now open your eyes. I go, do you feel a little different right now? And usually people go, yeah. Do you feel the difference in this room? Yeah. You know, what I'm saying is not new. But what is new, I say now, before you lose that, touch your instrument. You may think, how could that have been skipped? But you would not believe, it seems like different worlds. I know people that are masters of meditation and Zen masters. And when they go to their instrument or to create, they shrivel up. I once had a very spiritual person, a person who's like, he's a monk of sorts, took a piano lesson with me. And he's someone who I would say was enlightened, you know, in every other way, or so dedicated to God that he seems free of everything else. And he came over for this lesson, and he sat down in front of the piano, and he got small. And I said to him, did you forget who you were? And he burst out laughing. And he realized for him, playing the piano at that moment was yet another little corner that he had not dealt with yet. Somehow he thought, yes, I am God, but not when I'm playing the piano. So all I did, and I don't even know how I did it, because to tell you the truth, I wasn't really aiming at doing this. I started to speak, and this is the stuff I started to say. I never even wanted to be a teacher. Someone paid me some money, so I taught. And when I opened my mouth, this is what I said. And all I noticed is that you could do a lot of spiritual practice, but if you're still going to judge your work when you create, it all disappears, and now you're just sitting there neurotically trying to do something of value. So the only new thing I brought to the equation is that whatever spiritual practice you do, or runner's high, or anything you do that puts you in that space, before you leave that space, pick up the brush, pick up the pen, write something, and affirm that it's the most beautiful thought, brushstroke, word, you know, music that you've ever seen or heard. So you're learning to share your art with that space. How do you get to the space? Well, we could refer people to thousands of books to get to the space. There are people that read hundreds of those books, and they still can't forgive themselves when they're playing music, or painting, or writing an article. I knew another very spiritual person that was given the task of writing an article, and he was obsessing over it, and I said, just write a bad article.
Yeah, I like that.
What? That was horrible. I said, well, who knows? You might surprise yourself and write a great article.
And then what happened?
Excuse me?
What happened?
It probably would have happened, but as soon as he noticed it was a great article, he would have grabbed it again and tried to finish it. And it would have went from great to, oh, it's okay, or whatever. You know, this is a thing, a dynamic to definitely be played with. Granted, when it's time to produce for a magazine, for a concert, for a group, for a painting, for an art show, that's not the time to practice this. This should be practiced on your own when there are no consequences.
Right.
And what happens is it starts to bleed into your activities a little bit at a time. Sometimes you have a flash where you're doing your art, but it feels as free as when you were practicing this first, I call it the first step.
Yeah.
You know, going into space, commit your art. Go into the space, commit your art. You lose the space and start to evaluate what's going on, you drop the whatever the instrument is that you make your art with. You keep doing that without, can I give a brief story about how this works?
I was just going to ask if you could share, how is that for you? I know you're a very, very accomplished artist and musician, and I would imagine you were in countless situations. How do you apply that, and where does it take you? What is your experience?
You have to understand now that I started to practice this thing around 1970. So it's very difficult for me to feel the pressure of performing at this point.
Wow.
In fact, what happens is that, I tell people, practice going to the space, touch your instrument. Go into the space, touch your instrument. After a certain amount of time, you'll create this program. I touch the instrument, I go into the space. That's me. I'm not the freest person in the world when I'm not playing. But I am about the freest person in the world when I am playing, because I've been practicing this letting go for all these years. So when I go into a situation, like if I played in Carnegie Hall, I might have the thought, wow, man, I'm in Carnegie Hall. But because of this programming, what I did after that is I laughed. And I went, oh, Carnegie Hall? Across the street from Carnegie Hall is the Carnegie Deli. So I thought, Carnegie Hall or Carnegie Deli? What's the difference? And that was my natural state. Someone else would do that and it wouldn't work because they haven't repeated the new pattern often enough yet. How long does it take? I don't know. Maybe a couple of years. Maybe you'll notice that you're deeper into it after the first 10 years. But you'll notice that you've changed a little bit. Well, here's my story. When one of my teachers in this detachment told me to just drop my fingers on the keys. I tell this story in the book. And he told me to do nothing but drop my fingers on the keys for 2 weeks. And I went, oh my God, 2 weeks. I'll lose. I don't know why, but that made me panic. All this time I could have practiced, But I did nothing but that. And then after 6 days, someone called me to come play at their party with my friend, come play duo at the party. And so I played hooky, and instead of doing it for 2 weeks, I just did it for 6 days. But for 6 days, I did nothing but drop my fingers like this for 5 minutes, and then I walked away. And I thought, I don't know if I'm doing anything here, but at least it's one of the few things the teacher told me to do that I'm doing it. Most of the time I didn't do what my teachers told me to do. So after 6 days, I sit down in this person's house, and I start to play, and I go, what is going on? My hands started to play by themselves while I watched. I had not had that experience up to that time. And not only did they played better than I play. They played things that I had practiced but not really known yet. And instead of my ego trying to play so good, they just played what they knew. And it came out cleaner and more beautiful sounding and further along in the jazz world than I had gotten. And my even friends going, oh my God, listen to that. And I'm looking at him while my hands are playing, going, I know, this is 6 days of passively touching the instrument without desire led to a miraculous experience that was so compelling that's why I never looked back since that day. There's no question in my mind that if a person will spend time touching the instrument from that passive place and just making the connection and letting go of all desire, that something wonderful will happen. And since then, when I started to teach about 8 years later, because people were seeing me play, it was so relaxed. They were saying, how are you doing that? And I said, doing what? I didn't realize that just from practicing this, I was starting to look and sound different than other people. So as I started to explain it, I started to teach it. But I had many experiences of a student who I said, do nothing but this for a week. And I get a call at 12 o'clock at night. I played a gig last night. I played the greatest gig of my life. I said, oh, good. Now tomorrow, go back and just do the same exercise again. Click, Wow. So I really did it work for me, but I've seen a lot of people, a lot of students of all ages have peak experiences working this.
Now, I'm not 100% sure that I understood the exercise. You just drop your fingers on the instrument without making a sound?
No, not necessarily. If you drop your fingers, if they make a sound, great. If they don't, also great. First, you go into the space. Okay, so we're acknowledging that everybody might have a myriad of ways of going into that space. But if you don't, you could use the CD in my book, for example, or you could find some mode for that. If someone has no reference from that, I would suggest sitting there and noticing your breathing for a moment. And then as you start to fall into that space, then you open your eyes, you approach whatever, I'll use my instrument, put your hand there. Are you still in the space? You haven't played a note yet. If not, put the hand down. Go back into the space. You know, this space is a little tricky for a thinking mind. So I would recommend anyone get help to find that space, a meditation class or a teacher or some methodology, because just doing it on our own is kind of tricky. The mind, I like to say my conscious mind is smarter than I am. You know, it might be my intention to be in that space. My conscious mind will trick me into thinking again. Right. So I would recommend, as a pre-step even, that people, but most of the people I'm guessing that will be looking, for example, at your series, are seekers who have already thought about this space. I don't think the people will seek what you're doing right now are people that have sought that kind of awareness, that kind of presence, that kind of peace of mind. I'm sure a great percentage of them will be like that. So whatever they have found up to now, they would rely on that. Go into that space, get to the instrument. I would lift a finger, drop the finger. It's not, if I made a sound, great. If it didn't make a sound, also great. Lift the next finger, drop it. Now, if I'm thinking now, I didn't get a sound the first time and I go, then my awareness will go, oh, now I'm attached. And I drop my hand and go back to the space. When I'm ready, the hand floats up again. The next finger that I was working on lifts and drops. And it works the same way for singers, except for singers, they would go into that space. The only aggressive thing they would do would be inhale, and then they would attach a sound to the exhale. And no matter, they wouldn't try to be a singer. Whatever that sound was, in their mind, they would be saying, that's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard, whether they believed it or not. So that's how you practice it. Is that clear?
Yeah.
You know, there's really, and I'll talk about it at the end, but on my videos, I do this step. So people can see exactly how a person sits at the instrument, gives up the ego of trying to control what they're doing, and pretends that they're a channel for something else, whatever that is that agrees with their particular
right. Yeah, why don't you tell us right now? I am sure there's a lot of the listeners who would love to find out more about your work, even come see where you play. How can they get a hold of you or your website?
Well, it's kennywerner.com, W-E-R-N-E-R, because in America, when you say Werner, they think Warner, from Warner Brothers.
Right.
If you're in Germany, they know it's Werner.
Right.
So kennywerner.com, and there you'll find links to my book, which basically lays this all out. But if you're curious as to what it looks like to train yourself to be an instrument, see, that's what we're really talking about here. You train yourself to be the instrument that plays the instrument, or the instrument that paints, or the instrument that writes. I demonstrate it, and with several instruments, very clearly in my videos on the website jazzheaven.com. But there's a link on my website to that. And there's two videos, and one is called Effortless Mastery, the 4 Steps. And that particular video is where I demonstrate these steps quite clearly. And if our conversation doesn't make it entirely clear how someone commits that to their own act, those videos definitely do.
Awesome. Awesome. I think what you shared with us today is extremely useful and practical. The only thing that I would think is that what kind of word of advice or encouragement could you give if somebody was listening right now and going like, well, that sounds all good, but he has been doing this for 40 some years. How can you What kind of word of encouragement or advice can you give to kind of transcend the idea that it will take forever?
Yeah. And also, you have a lot of people that, how many times people come up to me and say, "Oh, I played the piano as a little kid. I wish I never stopped." I mean, if I had a nickel for every time someone said that to me, and they never, how would I ever start again? And I would say, start with something small and really learn to do it well.
Mm.
So, on the technical side, start with a small event, whatever your art is, and just learn to really own it instead of just drowning in all the things that you have to do. Usually people can't start again because they don't know where to start. So you start somewhere and you just make sure you can really learn to control that particular technique, whatever it is, whether it's a scale or a brush stroke or practicing, free association of writing words or whatever the thing is. So spend part of the time practicing a technical part, but a small amount. Instead of practicing a lot and not controlling anything, practice just a little bit and get the experience of, wow, I really have ownership of that. And then on the other side, allow yourself to play with the medium, free form, without judging yourself. And practice stopping when you start judging yourself. Go into the space and do it again. And I guess the other thing I would say is just do it for 5 minutes, because people don't know where to start and they think it's a long path and they don't, I don't have time today. For 5 minutes, sit in front of your instrument or in front of your easel or in front of the paper and just write something or paint something or play something. And after 5 minutes, you can walk away. And now you're programming yourself to say, thank you for that 5 minutes.
And truth be told, we judge ourselves in doing anything and everything. So it's a skill that can be practiced while we drive, while we cook, while we write an email, while, any situation at work.
I would say in every one of those situations, except perhaps driving.
Yeah, you don't want to drop it.
Don't want to practice face while driving.
But the ability to notice, to just paying attention and notice, oh, I'm judging myself again.
Yeah, being aware at any time is a good practice. But for people that can't get started on their art, I would let me make it simple. Just do your art for 5 minutes, and no matter how it comes out, appreciate yourself for doing it and celebrate yourself for doing it. Maybe let's boil it down to that. For 5 minutes, go over to that thing you want to do and just do it and walk away and celebrate yourself for having done it.
Yeah, maybe walk away fast.
You walk away fast?
Yeah, to not get into the judging and all of that. To just do it and go on to doing something else.
Well, stop and acknowledge yourself, even if you don't believe it. It's a practice in reprogramming. Reprogramming is tricky, but it's possible. You have to repeat the same new pattern over and over again. So I touch the instrument, I sit there for 5 minutes, I move my hands around the instrument, I walk away and go, I really celebrate myself for doing that. I commit to doing it again tomorrow, and then go on and do something else. I would agree with that.
So I have one last question for you as we come to a close, which is that when you perform and you are in this very, very free space, what is it that you're experiencing?
Wow. It is, channeling. It's funny. I was just listening to, in Sirius Radio, there's a thing called Oprah Radio, there's a station of hers, and she basically asked Robin Williams the same thing. And his answer would be my answer to you. You feel like you're channeling. Some kind of energy is flowing through you. It is such a divine feeling. It is an orgasmic feeling. It is an intoxicating feeling. But you cannot interrupt that flow with judgment, just like if you were sitting on the riverbank and watching a river go by, you wouldn't get in the river, get in the way, and try to paddle it yourself, because your body in the river itself, just the presence, or stream, I should say, just the presence of your body would break that flow. It's the same thing here. I'm watching the music come out, and because it's coming through me, it's like, I guess, if I was a wire or some kind of electricity was going through it. There is a buzz, and it goes through your body into the instrument, and then I get a second intoxication. The instrument makes a sound, and I hear that only one way, like, I'm programmed to hear that as, I'm not programmed to hear it as like, So I get the intoxication of feeling the music go through me, touching the instrument, and I get the intoxication of the sound of it, wafting, whatever the word is, wafting through my ears.
Wow.
One time I said, it's like I'm a tube of toothpaste and someone's squeezing me and the toothpaste is coming out, like that. I said that in a clinic recently in Denmark, and the front, for some reason, the guy that was writing was so enamored of the workshop that he put it on the front page, but the caption was, someone read it to me in Danish, I am a tube of toothpaste. That's on the front page of the main Danish paper that day in Copenhagen. So, but I mean, it's like something is flowing through you and you're feeling the thrill. And it's just gushing. It's like a fountain.
Awesome.
Maybe a fountain.
Awesome. Thank you so very much, Kenny.
Oh, you're very welcome, Rosine. Thank you.
It was really wonderful to have you here. And I am sure that people are going to experiment and try what you have offered. And it just sounds really delicious.
Ah, delicious is a good word for it.
Thank you very much.
Well, again, let me just say that if they're confused on how to find that in themselves, they can have a look at that video and they can really see how you do it. And if it inspires them to find that space, that's a good thing too.
Awesome. And thank you everyone for listening in. If you missed parts of this conversation or you'd like to hear it again, you can view it for free for another 24 hours. Or you can purchase the upgrade package, which is a compilation of all the videos of this round table. And thank you. And I look forward to connecting with all of you in the next installment of the round table. Unlock your creative genius and get paid for it. Thank you.